Cameras, please do, as this is official student union business.
What's happening? Got it.
Perfect. Awesome. Appreciate you. So we're just having some slight technical difficulties. That's fine. That works. I'm calling from inside. All right, perfect. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The Waterloo, the Wilfrid Laurier University Students' Union acknowledges the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. I would like to start off our meeting with any of the regrets. Director Ellis has sent her regrets to this email, to this meeting. We've had one director resignation and potentially a second. Do we have any do any directors have any conflicts of interest to declare? As I see none, we can move on to the adoption of the agenda. I would like to motion that the Board of Directors adopts the agenda with 3 amendments to the agenda. The first amendment being pulling the board management directives out of the consent agenda. The second would be to add the ownership linkage committee election to the agenda. And then the third would be to add a director resignation conversation decision to the agenda as well. Is there, do I have to call them up? Do I have a seconder? I'm sorry, Vice Chair, the Vice Chair, Rubinoff? Yes. Vice Chair Rubinoff seconds the motion. Do we have any opposition? Do we have any discussion on the motion as presented? Director Corey, do you have a?
Sorry, with the kind of as determined resignation, are there any HR issues that would force that into in camera, or is that good for public?
I don't believe that there are any HR related issues to discuss.
We don't need to name names.
Yeah, we do not need to name names. I don't believe that there are HR related discussions that require us to be camera.
Awesome.
Any other questions? All right, as I see none, we'll go into voting. Any objections? Any objections? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Six, 7, 8, 9. So that will be 0 to 0 to 9. Is that correct? Did I call it right? Okay. Perfect. So I would like, other than the, is there anything on the consent agenda that we didn't pull? No, so it's done. Okay, so we'll move on to the approval of meeting minutes. Is there a motion? Would a director like to motion that the Board of Directors approve the minutes of the March 2nd, 12th, 30th, and April 12th meetings? Director Sloan, do we have a seconder? Director Corey, any discussion on the matter of the minutes? Any questions? As I see none, we'll move into voting. Any objections? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Seven, 8, 9. So that'll be zero, the motion passes 0 to 9. On to the comments from the chair of the board and CGO. This portion, I'll actually start off by saying thank you for attending. Are there any questions? Director Sloan? Oh, no. Okay, no worries.
I had to put my hand up.
No worries. So I'd like to start off by saying thank you for attending the meeting and doing a very fun training session. I really appreciate the directors that have answered my email. Going forward, please do send when sending your attendance, please RSVP me and the governance coordinator so that we can track your responses well. I really appreciate you guys all for showing up. On this section, we'll actually be going through the parts that we pulled. We'll go through the BMDs 1 to 2D2. Would you be able to open on the Teams the policy manual? Oh wait, I have the policy manual over here. So if directors can open up the policy manual, would you be able to share, Director Muller, the policy manual directors? Do you know what page it is in the manual? The BMDs? Are the BMDs in here? 43. 40? Okay. Oh, I passed it.
Looks like this.
Are you sure it's the BMDs are in here?
Sorry, not in the
Oh,
board.
it's not in here. Okay. So it's not in the policy manual. My apologies.
Sorry, it's in the policy.
In the policy manual, this
not
is.
the
Okay, so it's in the policy manual, not the board manual.
Do you want me to-
No, he's just sharing it. So we'll start off with the first board management directive. The board will hold the president and chief executive officer as their sole official connection to the operational organization, its achievements and its conduct. President Spendler is essentially our employee. We will supervise her and make sure that she does her job to the best that she can. And this will be, so one of the big important parts of this policy is understanding what we cannot do. No directors are to instruct staff to do things or not to do things. Only the board can speak as a whole to the president and CEO. So really important. Don't try to overstep your boundaries. If we can go to BMD2, please. So BMD 2A.
All, just as for a note, all of this stuff is in the agenda package.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So this is all in the agenda package. So please, if you could follow along or just watch the stream. Officially passed motions of the boards are binding on the president. Essentially, anything that we all decide is therefore enacted. The board will ensure that decisions or instructions of individual board members, officers, or committees are not binding on the president. It's only the board that can, the board in its totality to pass motions to do that. So no committee can tell the president what to do. Unless the board has actually specifically authorized such exercise of authority. So the board in very specific situations can designate a single director or officer of the board to provide direct instruction to the president. And the board will remain cognizant of their motions to ensure that they do not take a material amount of staff time or funds, nor are disruptive unless necessary for the board to function. So we need to make sure that when we're making decisions and pass motions, that we do not make any decisions that are unnecessary or take up an inordinate amount of time and effort. So this will be something that hopefully the board, as it becomes more experienced, will become more comfortable in making requests that are reasonable. As Director Corey has mentioned, yeah, so we need to make sure that we do not cause an undue hardship on our operational staff. They're plenty busy in and of themselves. BMD 2B, the president is the only link to the operational achievements and conduct, so that all authority and accountability of its staff, as far as the board is concerned, is considered the authority and accountability of the president. So the president delegates certain tasks to its members, but are essentially the buck stops with them. Let's put it that way. So any achievements, but also any mistakes that are done by any of the staffs, any of the presidential staff is essentially accountable to the president. The board will hold fully accountable, the president fully accountable for all organizational operations, view presidential performance as identical to organizational performance, so that organizational accomplishments of a reasonable interpretation of the board stated ends, and avoidance of board prescribed means will be viewed as successful president performance. So we will not direct the president exactly what to do. We will give them general guidance as to what to do. And we will never give instructions to persons who report directly or indirectly to the president. That's self-evident, and not evaluate either formally or informally any staff other than the president. So that's really important when directors, which I do encourage to go and interact with operational staff, not to give any sort of formal or informal evaluation on their performance. BMD 2C, the board will instruct the president through written policies that prescribe the organizational ends to be achieved and describe organizational situation and actions to be avoided, allowing the president to use reasonable interpretation of these policies. The way that we do that in our policy governance model is through the executive limitations that we have in our policy manual, where we prescribe what the president must, and most importantly, must not do. Sometimes you'll notice that there are double negatives. So the president must not operate without undue regard for something, for example. So the board will develop policies instructing the president to achieve specified results for specified recipients at a specified cost. These policies will be developed systemically from the broadest, most general level to more defined levels and be called the ends policies. All issues that are not ends issues are defined here as means issues. Develop policies that limit the latitude that the president may exercise in choosing organizational means. These limiting policies will describe practices and activities, decisions, and circumstances that would be unacceptable to the board, even if they were to be effective. Policies will be developed systemically from the broadest and most general level to more defined levels, and they will be called executive limitations policy. The board will never prescribe organizational means delegated to the president. The board will acknowledge that below the global level, the aggregate of limitations on any given level may embrace the scope of the foregoing level, but only if justified by the president to the board's satisfaction. Authorize the president to establish all further policies, make all decisions, take all actions, establish all practices, and develop all activities so long as they use any reasonable interpretation of the board's ends and executive limitation policies, such as decisions of the president shall have full force and authority as if they are decided by the board. So we essentially delegate the authority of the board to the president for very specific ends, and we will accept any reasonable interpretation of those policies by the president. We will only, quote, check the president if those interpretations are considered by the board to be unreasonable. These are very rare occasions, and I have not seen that in our corporate records, to my knowledge. Finally, we'll have the authority to change its ends and executive limitations policies. Any changes to the ends of their organization requires a special majority, a supermajority of 2/3 of the vote of the board. So long as any particular delegation is in place, the board and its members will respect and support the president's choices. So just last year, we did do a minor amendment to the ends policy for specific reasons. BMD 2D1, we're getting near the end. Systemic and rigorous monitoring of the presidential job performance will be solely against the only expected presidential job products, organizational accomplishments of the board policies on ends and organizational operation within the boundaries established in board policies on executive limitations. A little bit wordy, but very specific. The board will determine the degree to which board policies are met through monitoring. So this information that does not do this will not be considered to be monitoring data. Acquire monitoring information by one of three methods: internal reports, external reports, and direct board inspections. So how will we judge these? We'll judge these based on the reasonableness of the president's interpretation and whether the data demonstrates the accomplishments of its interpretation. The board will accept any reasonable president interpretation of board policy being monitored as the standard for compliance. The board is the final arbiter of reasonableness, but will always judge with a reasonableness or with a reasonable person test rather than interpretations favored by board members or by the board as a whole. So the best way I could describe that is, what would a student think if they were to describe this policy, for example? Monitoring information will be presented to, from all campuses in which the student union operates. If there are discrepancies in compliance, all policies that instruct the president will be monitored at a frequency and by a method chosen by the board. The board can monitor any policy at any time by any method, but will ordinarily depend on a routine schedule as follows. So if you want to look at that, we have previously amended this policy to increase monitoring on specific executive limitations due to circumstances that arose throughout the governance process. So this is a good opportunity for directors when we're monitoring president and the organizational performance to see if we need to report on certain policies more frequently than others, while also making sure that we're taking into consideration operational the operational reality of our organization. Director Malton.
Just a clarification, the periods of monitoring, there are 12 periods. The periods relate to month. So it lines up with our fiscal. So period 1 is May, which we're in right now, all the way to period 12 being April, just in case that wasn't obvious.
Exactly. If you could scroll down, please. BMD 2D2, which I believe is the last policy. In order to ensure that the president conducts themselves according to the policies contained herein, and to ensure that the president continues to work diligently towards the ends of the Wilfrid Laurier University Students' Union, the following performance management outline is provided. The board will provide the president with a confidential, such as in-camera mid-year performance review and discussion during the last week of September. The board chair will provide a performance feedback on behalf of the board of directors, and the meeting will be facilitated by the executive director, Phil Champagne. The board will provide the president with a confidential review of performance during the last week of January. The board chair, again, will do the same and ensure that the president responds in writing to the mid-year review within 14 days of completing the performance discussion. As we've had last year, we had to make sure that this policy was followed directly and had to make sure that the president was held accountable to this policy. Oh, do we have one more? Or is this the last one? Or we're still going. In order that the board ensures progressive performance from the office of the president, the following performance management outline is provided. In the event that the board determines that the president has acted unlawfully, imprudently, or in violation of commonly accepted business practices and professional ethics, the board may take action. The board will provide with the president with a verbal or written notification of performance concerns given a simple majority, 50% of the board, to provide the president with a written notification of 1 to 5 days suspension with or without pay in consultation with the student union solicitor, given a special majority. So this would be 2/3 of the board. Provide the president with a notification of termination from the office of the president in consultation with the union solicitor, will given a special majority, 2/3, vote of the board, and written confirmation from the union solicitor that grounds for termination exist. So this is essentially just progressive discipline. Hopefully, we'll never have to enact this policy in action. So I hope. And this conclude, I will just do a final recap. It's really important that the board, works together to hold the president accountable to our ends and make sure that the organization is operating efficiently. It's important that, although informal contact is encouraged, make sure that we stay within the rules and the bounds as written in policy, and that we do not exceed that. If you do need any extra clarification or have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, via Teams or email. I'd be more than happy to do that. You have my email or the board email, feel free to do that as well. But I really think that the best way that we're going to govern this year is by attending the meetings and holding the president accountable to the specific policies as outlined. And that will kind of lead to a successful governance. I'm really excited to see what ends up happening. And we will now move on. Oh, does anybody have any questions as to what to me, the chair and CGO?
I'll just follow up that one of the coming mock meetings will get into policy governance. So those BMDs were all part of our policy governance system. So it's a lot to take in, but there are some purposeful additional sessions to kind of further unpack how that all works. So if you're feeling a little lost at the moment, that's okay. We're going to come back to it a few times.
Okay, perfect. Are there any questions or discussion on what I had just presented? Okay, as I see none, we can proceed to the comments of the executive director, of the president and CEO.
Okay, so I don't have too much to report on, obviously, since it's only been a few weeks. So the elevators are working. That was just for the mock meeting. But a couple of things, which some of what I said in the mock meeting was true, so I feel like it was a bit confusing, but I did actually go to 2 leadership retreats recently since I started, one with like my internal team and then one with the student affairs team. So there's lots of different university partners there. So making good connections. Obviously orientation planning is fully underway. So that was true in the mock meeting. Other than that, just a lot of onboarding, a lot of just kind of planning for the upcoming year. We're hoping to have our like final plan within the next couple of weeks, kind of summarized into a few key points. And then obviously departmental goals within my team. So not too much to report on. I'm happy to take any questions if you guys have them, but I will definitely have a lot more to say at the next meeting and going forward, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Director Corey?
So first official meeting as sitting president, how's it feel?
It feels good. Thank you for asking.
I did have one question for the president and CEO. How would you feel if we had a governance and operational retreat? How would you feel if we had kind of a meeting with your senior executives and the directors as a whole, and we could kind of have like a discussion about our roles so that operations has an understanding of what we do, and then directors will then also have an understanding of our student union operations.
Do you mean over the summer term or sometime in the school
Over the
year?
summer, over the fall, that could be, discussed.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Probably would make more sense in the school year when your directors are back in Waterloo. But yeah, I'm totally open for that. I think that'd be a good idea.
Cool. Is there any feedback in regards to this idea by directors?
If we do it in the fall, I think that sounds like a great idea. I just will not be able to attend. I'll likely not be able to attend in the fall, but because I'm on call in the fall. So, but that sounds great, and I think I can kind of do some hands-on learning. That's
What if it was like after hours? Like
I'm gonna be in Toronto, probably
You're gonna be in
working
Toronto.
till, like at least 10.
Any feedback from other directors as to doing a governance retreat?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. Now on to comments from the executive director and COO.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to update beyond what's already been discussed. I've also been at those retreats that Megan alluded to. It's really good to kind of foster that relationship with student affairs as they kind of work through their strategic plan, which will hopefully be presented in the not too distant future. You had wanted a student affairs advisory agreement update. So as you know, that agreement was passed and ratified by the board in April, and so that agreement has been subsequently signed. Not a lot of work has happened since it's been signed. A lot of coordinating schedules. We had a student affairs executive group meeting today, discussing a lot of the hirings that are going on as a part of that agreement, not the least of which include a development officer dedicated to the area of student affairs to raise money specifically for those areas. We're looking for a financial analyst who can help us kind of keep track of all the money that the development person is going to be raising for student affairs. It's going to be a very exciting time moving forward. There's also currently a communications job posted that is open for hire as now. There's been a couple of meetings where we've trying to help remove some of the interim / acting titles from some of the jobs within student affairs. I don't fully know the job titles, but I believe the director of student success and retention is one of those positions. And I believe we have another meeting coming up with another position within the writing center. I'll be able to update more on that probably at the June meeting. Other than that, it's been business as usual. I'm not entirely sure when the next SALT meeting is, which is the student affairs leadership team to which Megan and I are both a part of. I'm not entirely sure when that is. Summer gets very difficult to kind of schedule meetings with conferences and vacations and such. So I'm not sure how often SALT meets over the course of the summer months.
Cool. Are there any questions for the executive director and COO?
Actually, there might be one additional update, if that's okay. I can't remember her exact title, but Jennifer Casey, who is essentially the registrar for the university, is going to go through the process of retirement. So there will be some sort of process, I'm sure, in hiring her replacement. There's a few vacancies at the university that have also kind of come up. We're working through some of those slowly, but very notably, for example, the AVP of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Barrington Walker, has moved on to McMaster. So that department is in a state of severe transition, and we're working with our partners in student affairs to kind of help direct what that looks like and try to keep the faculty and staff EDI priorities completely separate from those of the students. Because while the themes are similar, the priorities are different, and we want to make sure that student money is being spent on student support.
So if I could ask a question, what are some of your plans to make sure that our student funds are being used to develop student programming and not faculty programming as had happened before?
So we're in the very early stages of that within, I'm assuming, equity, diversity, and inclusion specifically. So we're in the early stages of that. In the meeting this afternoon, we had a very explicit conversation about the money staying within the student realm. The conversation is typically taking place between the dean of students, the vice president of student affairs, the vice president academic, and the AVP EI, who is Dr. Vanessa Oliver. As an acting AVP, and so they're in the process of trying to figure out funding. One of the things that's kind of gumming up the works, if I'm going to be honest, is in 2019, obviously Doug Ford and his government initialized the Student Choice Initiative, and we as a leadership team in the SAC room at that point thought that particular initiative was designed to attack marginalized communities and their work as a priority. And so we identified that and said, you can't tell us what our priorities are going to be. And so we kind of rearranged our SAAA agreement funding to be able to protect those groups. Then a whole bunch of people retired or moved positions and a lot of information got lost. So there was a period of time where money wasn't necessarily flowing to the area of student equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as the Indigenous Initiatives Office. And so we're in the process of trying to correct that moving forward so that the student initiatives become the priority and that those the work that's being done for students in those areas specifically get the money that they deserve.
Awesome. Are there any questions for the executive director and CEO?
Sorry, that was a much bigger update than I expected. I apologize.
All right, I will then move on. Since we amended the agenda, I will now proceed to the ownership linkage committee decision part. So as we've discussed previously, the ownership linkage committee is tasked with making sure that the board is connecting with our ownership. As I've described before, it is really important that we have highly motivated, interested directors that will want to partake into this committee on both campuses. Does anyone have any questions about the committee before, I guess I call for nominations? Isn't there a Brantford requirement? It's one. It's Director Sloan.
What does the time commitment? I know you said it's a little bit malleable with what you choose to do, but what would you say the average time commitment would be for a position like that?
I would expect it to be relatively light in the summer. The idea is that we would be planning events ahead of time so that we can communicate with operations to coordinate those events. One of the big things that I really would like to do this year would be to coordinate very well with operations to have some sort of more substantial presence during orientation week. Since orientation week has been a very big success last year, and I anticipate this year will be an even bigger success. I think that actively reaching out to our membership as part of their planning is going to be crucial. But then also making sure that we can coordinate with the regularly scheduled programming during the fall and the winter to have some board events as a whole, but then kind of mini dispatches, if you may, where we're more actively engaging with our membership. It is really important, specifically this committee, as it helps promote the longevity as the board. We must not only think about this year and the strategic ends of the student union as a whole, but to also kind of start planning for the next wave of directors to come. So any directors who are interested in making sure that we have good future prospects for directors on the board should really nominate themselves or nominate other directors that they think would do really well. Does that answer your question? So it really depends on what activities the committee decides to do.
Yes. Thank you.
Director Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm curious about the other committees. Will we be talking about those, or are they like further on in the year, like the financial committee, for example?
So, Director Muller, do you know when the finance committee election? Just to note, based on my own personal experience in the finance committee, it really, I guess, gets activated near the March timeline. So it's not like a committee that meets regularly throughout the year. It mostly looks at our audited statements, making sure that it's compliance with our executive limitations and our other policies, and then has other ad hoc tasks, but it's rooted in policy. So it's not a very large time commitment, although it is a very important committee in and of itself.
Financial planning and budgeting is September.
So as the executive director and CEO just mentioned, the election for that committee is during the September meeting.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
There's nowhere in the manual that lists the subcommittees, is there?
Yeah, so the standing ones are listed in the policy manual. So under GP2G, you can see there's the ownership linkage, which is the one committee that goes is active all year, so all 12 months. The finance committee has more, it's a specific product driven, so it's less time commitments, specific task. Then there's a general meetings and appeals, which only is struck if needed. So some years we don't even form that committee. It's just there in case we need it. And then that is the only standing committees. There's also direct inspection committees, which we'll get into with the policy governance system, but essentially those are committees struck for a very specific work product that usually takes only one meeting to accomplish. So ownership linkage is the most involved in terms of ideally the work begins in the spring, summer and continues through the end of April. The other ones are more like specific task oriented that you start and stop.
Yes, if I could add to the conversation, since there are a couple directors who on the board who are affiliated with fraternities, I do think that representation from that segment will be important, since coordinating with the fraternities has historically been something that the student union board of directors has somewhat neglected, and I would like to change that going forward. So if I could kind of add that to the discussion as it develops. All right, I could, are there any nominations, self-nominations or nominations of directors? Director Corey?
I will nominate the vice chair and myself.
Okay, Vice Chair, do you stand for the ownership linkage committee?
I'm not going to say.
Okay, Director Corey, do you stand?
Sure.
Any other nominations?
Oh,
Director Phillips.
I would like to nominate Director Jack Sloan and myself.
Director Sloan, do you stand?
I do, yes.
Director Phillips, do you stand?
I do, yes.
Director Spitzeri?
yeah, I also like to nominate myself.
Okay, do you stand?
Yes.
Perfect. Are there any?
I'm gonna make myself stand again.
Oh, you have to make it complicated, didn't you?
I want to make, I said this before.
Okay, the Director Rubinoff, do you
I'm
stand?
gonna stand. Okay.
Monster.
Change my mind. Sorry, guys.
Okay, so now we have
Look what you've
Five.
done.
5 directors for a committee of 4. Are there any potential resignations, or would the directors like to go to an election?
If it makes things easier, I'm willing to resign my.
Don't do it because it's easier. Do it because you want it.
Well, no, it's
Executive director.
it's also in terms of a time commitment thing. So I'd be happy to rescind that.
But I might make a recommendation that you make a motion to move forward with the nominations as they stand as the committee, because the more the merrier, and then it lessens the time commitment for everybody involved.
That's true. So we are not constrained by having a maximum of 4. The policy does say a minimum, I believe, of 4. So Director Sloan, if you are interested, we can have you on the committee and then try to work around our schedules. I do, as the executive director just pointed out, having more directors on the committee will lessen the workload on any single director. So will you still stand?
Yeah, I keep flip flopping here. Yeah, yeah.
And just to make a note of that, I think that works because I'm gonna be able to do in-person events for the summer and the winter, but I will likely be unable to do one during the week in the fall. So I think
Okay,
this works pretty
perfect. That kind of works out for everyone. So do we call it to a vote?
You just need a motion to
Okay,
agree.
yeah, so can I have a motion on the table to elect the directors Corey, Sloan, Phillips, Spitzeri, and Rubinoff? Director Sloan, do we have a seconder for the motion? Director Baldinelli. Is there a discussion on the matter? Okay, as I see none, we'll go into voting. Any in opposition? Any abstentions?
Just as a note, if you're being acclaimed, you are required to abstain.
I'm abstaining.
Yeah, so that's 1, 2. The other directors, are you going to abstain?
Director Phillips.
Yeah, okay, so that's one, so that's 5 abstentions. All those in favor?
Is Colton not abstaining?
Director Phillips, not abstaining.
Is Director Phillips online?
He's there. He's online.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's.
He might be at my.
He did, I saw his name.
Okay.
Okay,
I believe Director Phillips has had Wi-Fi issues all night.
Yes. So I did see him raise his hand, so that will be 5 in 5 abstentions, and then 4 in favor, I think. Oh wait, yeah, all those in favor, yeah, so 4. So that will be 0 to 5 to 4. Sorry for the mix up. We will now move to the 3rd amendment to the agenda. The director resignation decision. As Director Muller, if you could pull up the briefing note, that would be appreciated. As you will see in the briefing, Director Phillips, do you have the Director Hamilton? Do you have a question?
No, sorry.
So as you will see in the briefing note in a moment, we've had 1 director resignation, and we will potentially have a second one. So the board does need to make a decision as to how it will deal with 1 resignation and potentially a second one. Director Muller, okay, he's working on it. You open that up, okay, cool. That's all. So as you see in the briefing notes, we have 4 options. We can either leave the vacancy, we can leave this the 1, potentially 2 spots vacant. We could potentially invite a runner-up. We could call a second meeting, a special meeting of students, or a special meeting, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah, a special meeting of our membership, or the board can fill its vacancy, could fill the vacancy potentially by involving applications for elections amongst, so the election would be amongst directors. So some of the considerations that we do have to take into account is Article 4, Section 7 of our Constitution. The Board of Directors, so long as it is comprised of no fewer than 8 directors, shall continue to have legal authority of a complete board regardless of vacancies. The second consideration, Article 7, subsection D, indicates that any director elected to fill a vacancy shall hold office for the remainder of a term of office of the director whose directorship was vacant, which would essentially mean that a newly appointed director would then fill the vacancy of the vacant spot. Is there any other considerations? Okay, that's it. So Director Corey, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, of course, kind of reserving the time for discussion after the fact. I'd like to propose a motion that the board adopt option D to fill the vacancy in a election amongst the directors. And I can give my reasons if necessary.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a seconder? A second. So the Vice Chair Rubinoff will second the motion. We will now proceed into the discussion part of the decision. Are there any opinions that directors would like to share as to the motion? Director Corey, do you have
Yeah, so I guess I'll just kind of start off with the reasoning and I'll go kind of point by point. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to adopt option A this early in the term. We have 11 months left. So kind of leaving a vacancy for that long doesn't make a whole lot of sense to my mind. Inviting the runner-up ultimately kind of seems not redundant, but it, you know, ultimately the vote ended up happening. And then also by providing a full sort of election, that allows the opportunity for more people to run who may not have been aware of the election as it happened, which kind of leaves us C and D, at least from where I'm coming from. C also, to my mind, doesn't make a lot of sense just because ideally we'd want to have this vacancy filled before the end of the fall, which kind of given the summer, there's a very high likelihood we're going to suffer from a lack, not voter apathy, but most students aren't entirely aware of what's happening during the summer. So I think that we would suffer from that. So I think the most straightforward way of doing it, while still kind of opening up the field for candidates, would be option D. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the proposal.
Just to clarify on your point, you're proposing that we open the roll up or the rolls potentially up for application, and then the board then invites the applicants to the board potentially for an election, and then the board would elect the candidates that it deems competent, if we could put it that way. Specifically for your motion, what is the timeline that you're looking for?
So as I mentioned, I kind of think, well, we should probably have it done by the start of the fall. Which, I mean, we can certainly be flexible with that, again, because students aren't as active during the summer months. So I would probably give it a month or two. But again, I'm kind of open to whatever there.
Okay, Executive Director Teal.
I think that that's actually a pretty reasonable assumption. If we put out a call, we don't necessarily have to do it right away. It gives us time to build a proper marketing campaign. And then the later we do it in the summer, the more momentum we can kind of piggyback off of orientation week and incoming first year students starting to pay attention to our website. So it broadens or deepens the pool of applicants.
Okay. Any other discussion on the matter? On the motion?
Just the board will be running a similar style election for an open with the Wilfrid Laurier University Senate in June. So you'll also have an opportunity to trial run the process by doing that process for the one open Senate seat.
Okay. Would it be worthwhile to do a Senate and board of directors and then see what we get?
So the Laurier Secretariat's already closed that call. So we were today compiling.
Oh, I understand. Any other discussion on that? Director Hamilton.
Yeah, I have a question. I was wondering if you could explain special meeting. Is that just, so the board would have a meeting? And what's the difference between C and D? I'm just a little bit, if I can get some clarification on that.
Yeah, so C would be kind of a full election. So it would go to the student body as a whole. Whereas D, it would just be what are we down to? The 10, possibly 11 of us.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, thank you. That makes sense.
Director.
Just for additional context, in our most recent experience with a special election, it takes a very long time to get that across the finish line if students aren't paying attention, to which I think the whole point of the recommendation is because students aren't necessarily paying as much attention as they ought during the summer. And a special meeting costs money, whereas option D does not. Yeah.
Awesome. Director Russo.
Sorry, just to clarify, we're gonna wait till the fall to do option D, or are we doing it in the summer?
So kind of the idea that I have is we would open nominations throughout the summer and then we would have the candidate in place for the fall.
Just because if it's like the same as the nominations for what they were for all of us, it might be difficult for people to get the signatures required if it's in the summer only.
Yeah,
If they need the signatures, I don't know, like, do they need the student signatures like we did?
they would,
Yes.
but I think we have the capacity to do it digitally, so I'm not sure really, like, I get the concern, and it's a good concern, I'm not entirely sure how we'd address it.
Director Mullen.
So the Senate opening election that you'll be hearing in June, those candidates had to obtain signatures, signatures in a similar fashion. So those candidates have been able to do that. It's a slightly lower threshold, or might actually be the same threshold. And we've been accommodating digital means for doing that. So it doesn't have to be in person. It can be collected online as well.
Perfect. So I will call I'll actually recall the motion. So Director Corey, can you read your motion out with the specifications as you had outlined during your discussion, please?
Sure. Give me 1 second. I have to write them down. All right, let's go for it. I motion that the board adopt option D to fill the vacancy in itself by calling an election during the summer for candidates, and to have the director to make a decision by the August meeting, or the first meeting, either the August meeting or the first meeting of September. I guess we could determine that too.
Do I have a seconder on the motion? Of Vice Chair Rubinoff? Okay, Director Hamilton, do you have a question? Oh, okay, I was just motioning. Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, we'll go into voting. Any in opposition? Any abstentions? All those in favor? All those in favor?
We have 5 hands up virtually.
I'm missing
Sebastian, Gabrielle, Patrick, Josh, and Colton all have their hands up.
Yeah, there we go. So that's 0 to 0 to 9. Thank you. And now we will go back to our regular agenda. Yeah, can you bring it back to this? Perfect. So onto the board secretary hiring. Do you have is there a briefing on that? Or, okay, it'll just be a presentation. So as directors may not know, the board hires a board secretary to record our meetings into minutes so that it can be kept for our corporate knowledge, and to keep a record of decisions made by the board specifically. We have to launch a new process in order to do that, and I will bring it, or I won't bring a recommendation just yet. I would like to hear what directors, how directors would feel like the best approach would be to hire a new secretary before I provide my own input. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Can I ask how it's been done in the past?
Yes, so previously in the past, what we had done would be to do a small marketing campaign on our Laurier Votes and our Your Student Union Instagram pages. And we would essentially call out for applications from amongst the student population and from outside of just the undergraduate student population. And then we'd first strike a committee to do that, and then we would open it up for applications. The committee would then meet, review the applications, the way that it was done last year, we had 2 meetings or 3 meetings. The first meeting would be to go over the written applications. The second would be to call applicants to an interview, and then the last meeting would be to choose the ideal candidate. The committee didn't take too long to go through this process. It was very similar to hiring our governance coordinator. So that's how it was done before. Any other questions or discussion? Director Corey.
Sorry, does Ian, does the board secretary report to you or Phil or Orlin?
No, to the chair.
Okay.
We would, the only thing we'd recommend is that there's a operational HR representative on the hiring committee. That didn't happen last year and it made for a bit of inconsistency with the process. So that would be our ask.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great idea to make sure that we have an HR representative and then also have, you know, directors who are very interested in making sure that our board is run well to be part of a committee, if that's what you said. Executive Director.
I would also recommend that the hiring committee or whatever you want to call it, be small and nimble.
Yes.
And then maybe just for everyone's sake, it's a position that receives an per term honorarium received at the completion of the work for that term. So that's how it's compensated.
Yeah. Would it be worthwhile also if to have them report to me, but then also have the governance coordinator like kind of be the organizational liaison?
I mean, ultimately, in the past, how it's worked is the board secretary has submitted completed minutes to the governance coordinator. So I don't know that it needs to be that formal. That's generally the process that worked last year. So.
Okay. So what would directors like to motion on this decision? Director Corey?
I'll motion that we create a committee with directors to be nominated of no more than 3, which includes the chair, as well as an HR representative, and with an invitation for the governance coordinator to participate on the hiring panel.
Okay. Are there seconders on the motion? Director Slow? Yeah. Director Slow? Okay, any discussion on the motion / amendments that directors would like to make? Director Slow? No, that's Director Hamilton, I can't see very far.
Yeah, sorry, could you repeat it? It was cutting out for me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I motioned to create a committee to hire the board secretary, which would include an HR representative, the chair, and then 2 other directors. And then with an invitation for the governance coordinator, if that's felt to be necessary.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions on the motion? Any input? Okay, we will now move into voting. All those in opposition? All those abstaining? All those in favor? There's 5. I'm missing one. There we go. 6. So the motion carries 0-0 tonight. On to the spring and summer meeting schedule.
You haven't actually selected the committee.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. On to committee elections. Would we have any nominations from directors to be on the committee?
I'd
Vice Chair
like to nominate Director Baldinelli and myself.
Director Baldinelli, do you stand?
Sure, I'll stand.
Director, Vice Chair Rubinoff, do you stand? Any other calls, any other nominations for the committee? As I see none, we will move into voting. All those in opposition? All those abstaining? All those in favor? Oh, yeah, all those in favor? The motion passes. Wait, yeah, hold on. I'm,
Well, sorry, I think we needed 2 abstentions there.
Oh, yeah. I
Were we-
with them and
Ian, were they supposed to abstain?
I was just falling apart here.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's up to the board. I don't think there's gonna be any concern about conflict on this, so I
Okay.
wouldn't.
The motion passes 0-0 tonight. No, 0-0 tonight, because, yeah, it's fine. On to the spring, summer meeting schedule. Oh, Director Hamilton, do you have a? Okay, on to the spring, summer meeting schedule. We need to find a time that works for all of us for the June, July, and August meetings. When, so if directors can, bring forward times that works for everyone, that ideally is not at 8 PM on Tuesday,
Oh,
because it's a little late.
I was actually gonna say Tuesday evenings work great for me and most nights are kind of tough.
Okay, so as I saw in our,
Monday nights would also work.
so as I saw in our calendar matching thing, Tuesday evenings does work for a majority of directors. What I did want to ask is if we could make it at a little bit of an earlier time so that it is more favorable to our operational staff, but also to our other directors.
What about like 6:30 maybe?
Director Phillips?
I say I commute in from work and generally get back around 6:30. Would 7 o'clock or 6:45 work?
6:45, 7 or 6:45? Can we, our 7?
Seven.
Yeah, 7.
I mean, can we call it like 6:45? It's really. All right, would 6:45 work?
Seems oddly specific.
Yes.
Yeah,
Any time is oddly specific.
But just like an even better.
I think an even 7 works.
Even
My
7.
class goes till 5 and we get dinner.
Okay,
There
okay,
you go.
7.
That can
The
be
7 work for directors on
Tuesday nights.
Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any opposition on this?
Sorry, we're doing one meeting a month, so which Tuesday?
Okay, so which Tuesday would we like to do?
I would like to
That's true.
suggest in 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks,
Okay, what's the day?
June 20th,
June 20th?
and then just keep going on that.
June 20th works for me.
So, first, so it would be June 20th and then
July 18th,
July 18th and then
August 15th.
August 15th. Does 7 on these 3 dates work for all directors present at the moment?
I can't do the 19th or the 18th, whatever the July one was. I can't do that one.
Would the Tuesday before that work?
That's 11 for anybody's.
For the July 11th?
Would have to miss that one.
Um,
So I don't
What
know.
about a Monday?
Yeah, I could do the 17th, the Monday.
okay, the 17th at 7.
Call me TBD, I have a flight that day, so if all goes well, I should be able to make it. But if not, Phil can just speak on. Like you just.
Okay, so the 7 on,
Take mine if I can't make it.
okay, that's fine. So would Monday, the 17th at 7 work for all directors here? Awesome. Perfect. So can I have a motion on the table for the board of directors to meet for the spring semester on what days? Can you see this?
Tuesday, June 20th at 7 PM, Monday, July 17th at 7 PM, Tuesday, August 15th. at
Okay.
7.
Director Hamilton motions, Director Phillips, do you second?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion on the motion?
At 6:45, not 7. Oh, it's 6:45 or is it 7?
It says 7.
7.
We're keeping it at 7. I will call it the motion to vote. All those in opposition? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, all those in abstaining, my apologies. As I see none, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the motion passes 0 to 9. Okay, I would like to motion that the board of directors proceed to an in-camera session. Do I have a seconder on the motion?
If you want, Orland and I and Jesse.
Yes, so can I motion that the board of directors proceed to an in-camera session, including the director of policy research and advocacy and our governance coordinator. Director Corey, do I have a seconder on the motion? Director Phillips, any discussion on the matter? As I see none, we will proceed to voting. All those against, all those in opposition. Any abstentions? All those in favor? The motion